Imagine a world where one empire dominates all, its reach spanning continents. But with the world at war itself, from that devastation stands up a new force which will rewrite the laws of global rule. This is the gripping story of how America took to itself Britain's mantle of empire between 1941 and 1947, an episodic age in modern international history with its rich, tale-telling paradoxes that not only reconfigured the conduct of international affairs, but also molded the projection of a new world order. In this video, we will discuss the key events and policies that spelled the end of British hegemony and the ascent of America as a global behemoth. Wartime alliances, economic transformations, we explore the historical backdrop, key players, and lasting impact of these shifts. Let's get started. To fully understand how America overthrew the British Empire, let's first establish the scene. The British Empire was enormous at the beginning of the 20th century, encompassing the Americas, Asia, the Caribbean, and Africa. But there were difficulties with this power as well. Britain was already weaker in the wake of World War I, with weaknesses in its imperial structure exposed. Britain was facing serious economic difficulties when World War II broke out in 1939. Resource depletion from the war effort led to burgeoning nationalist movements throughout the colonies, which posed a severe threat to British power. The war's aftermath will only hasten the deterioration of the empire's fundamental structure. Britain found itself fighting to keep its hold on its colonies as well as the Axis countries as the struggle intensified. In the end, the conflict would expose the empire's weaknesses and pave the way for significant changes in the balance of power around the world. The Lend-Lease Act, a landmark piece of legislation that signaled a change in American foreign policy, was passed by the US in 1941. This act made it possible for the United States to support its allies militarily, particularly Britain, in their conflict with the Axis forces. The revolutionary Lend-Lease Act turned the United States into an arsenal of democracy. It made it possible for Britain to obtain food, weapons, and other essential supplies, significantly enhancing its war effort. However, there were drawbacks to this assistance. America's participation created the conditions for a change in power. Britain's reliance on American resources resulted in a growing degree of alignment between the two countries' objectives. This bond became more intimate as the conflict went on, quietly changing the geopolitical environment. Although it was far from equal, the idea of a special relationship between the United States and Britain started to take hold. Let us fast forward to July 1944, when officials from 44 countries gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The intention was to prevent the economic upheaval that followed World War I and to foster stability by establishing a new worldwide monetary system. The result was revolutionary. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, were established, two organizations that would be essential to the management of the world economy. The British pound was essentially marginalized when the US dollar was established as the main reserve currency. With this change, Britain's financial dominance clearly shifted to the United States. British influence on the continent continued to decline as European nations depended more and more on American economic policies as they recovered from the war. Nationalist sentiment increased throughout British colonies as the war went on. After the war, colonial leaders in places like Kenya, India, and the Caribbean started organizing for independence. Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, for example, came to symbolize the fight for independence thanks to the self-determination tenets expressed in the 1941 Atlantic Charter. As it declared that every country had the freedom to select its own government, this constitution stoked aspirations for independence. The British frequently used repression in reaction to these increasing demands. But the overwhelming strength of these nationalist movements exposed the empire's waning influence. As a result of Britain's incapacity to adequately respond to these demands, colonial authority finally fell apart quickly. The United States had to work to stabilize Europe and stop communism from spreading after the war. The Marshall Plan, which was launched in 1947, sought to use massive financial help to rebuild the economies of war-torn Europe. More than $12 billion was set aside to support the stabilization and infrastructural development of European nations. This was not only a humanitarian effort, it was a calculated move to undermine Soviet sway in the area. The United States maintained its position as the head of the free world by framing itself as the beneficiary of the post-war recovery. Britain was further marginalized in international politics as nations that benefited from the Marshall Plan sided with the United States. Decolonization accelerated quickly as a result of the combination of these reasons. Asia and Africa experienced a surge of independence movements in the post-war era. India's 1947 Declaration of Independence was very noteworthy. The division of the world into India and Pakistan brought to light the difficulties newly independent countries encountered during the process of decolonization. The sad results of hastily established borders were huge migrations and communal strife. With each new colony seeking independence, the British Empire began to fall apart quickly, bringing an end to a centuries-long period of history. The events of 1941 to 1947 brought about a significant shift in the balance of power in the world. The fall of the British Empire signaled the start of a new period in which the United States became the main global superpower, not merely a change in politics. As newly independent nations forged their way through the ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, this transition prepared the way for the Cold War. The ramifications of these shifts are still felt in the geopolitical environment of today, impacting trade agreements, foreign policy, and cross-cultural interactions. The world order changed as newly sovereign nations emerged. Nations such as Ghana, India, and others affirmed their national identities while battling internal strife and dire economic conditions in their pursuit of full sovereignty. There were some difficulties with these movements. Significant obstacles faced newly independent states were economic reliance, political instability, and colonial legacy. The fight for self-determination and autonomy was just getting started. Thinking back on this historic turning point, what do you believe contributed most to America's ascent to dominance during this pivotal era? Was it the colonies' drive for independence, military pacts, or economic plans? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. If you enjoyed reading about America's part in the fall of the British Empire, remember to subscribe for more in-depth historical analysis. Watch out for our upcoming video.